Thank you, Now. It's not easy to have a session after lunch. Okay, so we will try and see how we can make this fun, interactive, and interesting. But I think Yomi's session earlier on, is going to help this conversation. Typically, you not really see connections between trade and tax. But after listening to Taiwo and the rest of the team, a couple of things that he said at that session. He said things like Africa, we must pull together. Okay, so whether it's the rules, whether it's how we ensure that as a bloc, we have a seat at the table. I think it's absolutely important. If you look at, Africa is about 1.5 billion people. Okay, India is 1.5 billion as well. China is about 1.5 billion. But if you look at the GDP of these territories, you see China is about 18.7 trillion, same population. Okay, India is about 3.9 trillion. Let's say $4 trillion. Africa is about just 3 trillion as well. So underscoring, how important it is for us to pull together and speak as one voice. Talked about base erosion as well earlier on. Okay, and how there's a lot leaving Africa in terms of value. And then to underscore this, we're here in Ghana, Ghana and 2 countries away, Cote d'Ivoire, and I think Nigeria as well. Together, we have about 70% of the world's cocoa. These countries, earn about $10 billion in an industry that worth about $130 billion. Okay, so the cocoa is here, but we're getting just $10 billion out of $130 billion. So again, what can we do about that? But I would say, but we're collecting import duties. Remember, from perspective of cocoa, what happens is we send them. It's used to make your chocolates, confectionaries, and so when it comes back into Africa, some will say, but we collect import duties, so we're collecting tax. But remember what we said earlier today. At what cost? Okay? And the cost is you collect 25, 30, 40% import duties, but you probably lose jobs, intellectual property, exchange control, because you have to find forex to be able to import those things, jobs, food security, health security, all sorts of things. So in Africa, summary is that we must write our own rules. Yeah? So it's against this backdrop that Africa heads of states years ago, okay, have been thinking about how can we pull together in Africa, okay? How can we start, processing the things, either commodities or minerals that we have, to be able to extract value. March 2018, African countries came together and set up the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Which pretty much essentially is saying, let's have an agreement for Africa that would spur and drive economic growth. So it's 7 years now, thereabouts, since we had this landmark agreement. What has happened? Okay, the aims and objectives of the AFCFTA, are you actually deriving it? So to give us a current state of play and to tell us more about the AFCFTA and how it's helping to drive, this conversation, I have Mohammed Ali, the Director of Trade in Goods and Competition at the AFCFTA Secretariat. Please, sir.
Hello? Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. And allow me to start by picking on the last point. You said 7 years down the line. However, when someone think about the AFCFTA and think when it started, not everyone really realize or understand what is the journey toward the realization of the AFCFTA, or at which stage the AFCFTA implementation at. And this is my presentation today. I'm trying to give to you a sense of what is the status of the AFCFTA implementation, where we at, what we had to go through as in the journey of the implementation of the AFCFTA for you also to realize where Africa is heading and maybe how you can position yourself in a best way to benefit from the AFCFTA. So the first point that I want to maybe emphasize on the AFCFTA is a dream where the African economies, instead of going to maybe the international market or being in the business market, and you as a country start to market your economy as small as your economy, because even the biggest economies in Africa, when they are compared with the size of economies that you mentioned in your introduction, they are still very, very small. But at least when you speak about Africa as one unit, you start to speak with the T, with the trillion. So this is the idea, to create a single market for Africa. And for the African Union, we have 55 countries. And as you said, on the 21st of March 2018, our heads of state and government came together and they signed the AFCFTA agreement. As we speak now, we have 54 countries who signed the agreement. It's only the state of Eritrea that is still not yet signed. But for anyone knows about trade agreements, and even you heard about the WTO and its progress, it is a very long and lengthy progress. However, the AFCFTA process has been described to be one of the fastest processes that maybe relatively to the size of the agreement of the AFCFTA. So we signed the agreement on March 2018. It has in it built-in requirement to enter into force to be legally effective by the ratification of 22 Parliament of the African Union. We reached to that milestone in June 2019. In 2020, the African Union Heads of State again elected the Secretary General of the AFCFTA, and we started the process of selecting the host country. And in August, we had maybe the start of the function of the AFCFTA Secretary. Throughout the journey, if you noticed or if you remember seeing anything about these dates, 2020 and 2021, 2019 was the peak of COVID-19, which was maybe the worst time for any mega project like the AFCFTA to start, and that definitely affected the progress on the built-in agenda, whether it is concluding the negotiation and implementation. And I'm here to show you where we stand from 2022, because 2022 is the first date where we maybe commission trade under the AFCFTA after concluding all the ongoing negotiation and started the implementation journey. So this is the objectives of the AFCFTA, create a single market, as I said, and expand on the intra-Africa trade of our regional economic communities, because the AFCFTA came to Africa, where we have so many regional economic communities that working maybe to make sure the regional integration in that geographic area is being achieved. However, there was no framework that allowed maybe a West African consumer to taste the tea that is coming from East Africa was with maybe a preference. So that's why you go to supermarket, you find tea that is coming from everywhere in the world with very maybe few chance for someone from West Africa to taste the tea that is coming, or the fresh tea that is coming in East Africa. Similar thing for North and South. For example, from the countries that I'm coming from, Egypt and country like South Africa, we have different agriculture calendar. There is some fruits, there is some vegetables that is being available in Egypt in January. They are not available in South Africa because we have the winter in January in Egypt and it is summer in South Africa in January. So there is a lot of complementarity that can happen if you connect these geographical, regional economic communities or geographical bodies. Another objective is promote and attain sustainable, inclusive, and development for gender. And the fourth one is promote industrial development. Because as you said, the goal is not only to trade. The goal is what we are trading and what values that we are bringing. If we keep trading the same raw material, we will not increase level of intra-Africa trade. We will not generate jobs or not create jobs, and we will not end up with maybe better economic status or better economic prosperity. The fifth one, enhance the competitiveness of the African economies. Many of us have across the world, and if you open any channel in your hotel room, CNN or whatever, and you can find that many countries, they market themselves, come and invest in my country, country X, and you will have access to the ASEAN market. Come and invest in my country X, and you will have access to the European market or any other market. This is for the first time you can see or you can market Ghana to come and invest in Ghana and have access to 55 countries, African countries. So that is the increase of competitiveness. So this is the journey that I was referring to, and COVID and the start of 2018, moving to 2021, where we had our heads of state and government, they met virtually. This is for the first time in the history of the African Union, the heads of state meet virtually. But they met virtually because of COVID-19, and they met virtually because they had to make a statement about the AFCFTA, so that we have the first maybe start of trade, or the announcement of start of trade, the political announcement of start of trade happened in January 2021. In 2022, we created what we call the Guided Trade Initiative. The Guided Trade Initiative was an initiative of the Secretariat to move away from maybe the normal practice of the African Union and start to engage with the private sector to make sure that trade is happening. And the Guided Trade Initiative usually misunderstood as a standalone regime. However, the Guided Trade Initiative was just a kickstart for the agreement to kick in. So any trade that happened did not happen under the Guided Trade Initiative. It happened under the agreement, but we used the Guided Trade Initiative to ignite this process. For example, we started the first trade between Ghana and Kenya, and at that time there was some observations, some problems that we had to resolve, but once that problems has been cleared, we have seen the level of trade between Ghana and Kenya has increased, and we have seen the commercial maybe visits has been being done on a regular basis. As we speak on 2025, we have 49 state parties of the AFCFTA agreement that have ratified. So from June 2019, where we had only 22 countries, we have now 49 state parties, and I think even that number has increased and now have 50 after the most recent ratification of Somalia. I think the device is... Yeah, I need to point at this slide. So out of the 49 state parties that ratified the agreement, we have 48 of them, they submitted what we call a schedule of tariff concession. Because this is again another element, if you are interested to know what is the structure of the AFCFTA, because someone would assume that once the AFCFTA entered, I can take all my products here from Ghana and they can go to South Africa, and South Africa can't impose any duty on me. No. Number one, you need to follow what we call the AFCFTA rules of origin. Number two, you need to know what South Africa liberalized and what South Africa considered as a sensitive product, which is a new concept. So I will try to maybe explain to what is the sensitive list and what is the tariff concession when we go to the trading goods. But the structure of the AFTA, as you can see on the screen, when we negotiated the AFCFTA agreement, we started with the idea that we want an agreement that allows the goods to move between the African countries. And then we told ourselves, okay, why we are stopping at goods? We need trading service to support goods that is moving. We need to make sure that we have dispute mechanisms that resolve the issues, because we learned from the lessons from the Rex that there is a trade dispute between countries that no one can resolve because it is only the political will that is there. So we created a standalone dispute mechanism to support the trading goods and trading service. And that's what we started with in March 2018. This is what we call phase one. In phase two, we added to that competition policy, where we are creating a inter-competition policy for the first time for Africa. We included intellectual property rights to help Africa to protect their property rights and to allow Africa to respond, maybe, God forbid, for the future crisis, to have our own narrative of the intellectual property rights. We created a protocol on investment. We created a protocol on digital trade. And for the first time in the history of trade agreements, we created a protocol on women and youth in trade. So since I'm the director for trading goods, I am in competition. I'm going to focus, and I think it is more suitable for this conversation today, on the protocol on trading goods, but this is a very technical annexes, but maybe the main takeaway for you to know that trading goods, under trading goods, we address the issues around the tariffs that you expected to pay, the rules of origin you need to follow, any things related to the technical barriers to trade, standards, SPS measures, resolving the non-tariff barriers, and under the trading goods protocol as well, we have 3 annexes that deal with custom cooperation and transit. So, you may recall that I mentioned the Guided Trade Initiative. When we started implementing the agreement, we figured that not all the countries in the same level of development, even the same level of structure of government. So there is so many countries that would require more work to maybe domesticate the agreement internally. So what we created the concept of a provisional schedule of tariff concession that allowed us in 2022 to implement the agreement. Was mentioned that as we speak now, in 2025, the final schedule of tariff concession is not concluded. So unless we created the Guided Trade Initiative and the provisional schedule of tariff concession, we will be speaking now with the agreement that was not implemented. So schedule of tariff concession, provisional schedule of tariff concession, what you are talking about? I'm talking about how the countries structure their tariff reduction. So because we have big economies like Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Algeria, and other countries, we have also smaller economies. So not all the countries can maybe respond to agreement with the size of the AFCFTA, with the potential of the AFCFTA in the same sense. So that's why the negotiators created this structure that make sure that there is a difference between what we call the least developed countries and the non-LDCs, where they create a category, what we call the level of ambition category A, that will have 90% of the tariff lines. What that means? Any product that is being exported or imported between countries in international trade has a code, has a HAS code. So 90% of all HAS code has been liberalized for category A for the non-LDCs, where they committed themselves to liberalize these products over 5 years. For the LDCs, however, they said we want extra maybe flexibility, so allow us to liberalize the same amount of tariffs, but on a longer time space, so they enjoyed 10 years. So we have a level of ambition of 90%. So what will happen to that remaining 10%? So they divided that to 7% sensitive products and 3% exclusion products, where a country can come and say, you know, this product I have national interest in, it is sensitive for me, or I want it to be excluded. That also provided a layer of complexity of the implementation of the AFCFTA, and there is so many views out there that is calling for all of that to be removed, and we have 100% market access. But as we stand now, this is the structure that we have under the AFCFTA. So, who's doing what? For countries who submitted all the categories, you can see them on the screen as green. Some countries submitted only category A, and there is countries that is in gray, they haven't submitted anything, namely Algeria, Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, and Sahrawi Republic. So, the countries that reported to us that they actually had trade happening among each other, that doesn't mean that the other countries, they are not part of the agreement or not willing to implement the agreement, but I'm speaking about those who reported to us that they send and receive products of the AFCFTA. You can see them on the screen. One thing that all these graphs will show you, it will show you that the AFCFTA is a journey. It is not an event that happened in March 2018 and you should expect you count from there, you should start counting. No, it is a journey. So, we started the Guided Trade Initiative, as I said, in 2022. We had on record 13 trade. By June 2025, we had recorded 8,500 shipment under the AFCFTA. And the number for the certificates of origin, I would personally assume that that number, because that is the number that is reported to us, the number is actually much higher than that. And when I say 8,500 shipment or 8,561, it is certificate of origin. So each certificate of origin can be in $1 million, can be in $100,000, can be even in $1 billion. It doesn't matter. It is 8,561 shipment. What is the dollar amount for that? We are yet to wait and see at the end of 2025 what would be the reports that is being issued say about that, because this is another angle or another deficiency that we have in Africa. We don't have up-to-date statistics collection mechanism. So these graphs show you which country is in full compliance with the requirement of the AFCFTA, and which country they have 4 out of 5 compliance. What I would say is up to 4 level of compliance, the countries or the country is expected to accept and implement the AFCFTA. So the Guided Trade Initiative, I will skip that for the sake of time, but I spoke about the objectives and what was the Guided Trade Initiative meant for, and that shows you, that graph shows you the development or the level of development of the Guided Trade Initiative. We started with the countries in yellow, and we expanded into the countries in green, and now the countries in red. In 2024, we included to reach the number of 39 countries. But we concluded the Guided Trade Initiative in November 2024, where we successfully said the Guided Trade Initiative reached its objective and its goal, and we tested the agreement, and the agreement is up and running between those countries. So it is now, it is the well, it is the political there is a word that we usually use when we describe the activities under the African Union. You say the political will. It is time now to translate this political will to political commitment. So it is up to now to the countries to make that transition themselves, since we tested already the agreement. So, as we speak, in 2025, obviously we just finished the the world just finished the COVID-19. We went again to another geopolitical crisis, which is the war or the geopolitical unrest. And currently now we have different types of war: trade war and actual war. And one thing that I want to touch on very, very quickly is the concept of, or what is the status of AGOA, because this is a very famous, example to make. When AGOA was designed before the AFCFTA. So the United States came individually to countries and start giving them non-reciprocal trading benefits, but on an individual basis. So you can find the US coming to Uganda and say, no, you are not in compliance, I'm going to remove you from AGOA. Or going to country X, I'm going to add you to AGOA, removing, adding. The reason I'm saying AGOA was, when it was designed, there was no AFCFTA, because if there is any hope in the future to reinvent a structure similar to AGOA, at that point of time, whoever the partner that is going to engage with Africa, they need to engage with the single market of Africa. So you can't go there and start speak about a single country. I should be careful with my words. You still can, but we don't advise. So another example that we created under the Guided Trade Initiative, something we call the AFCFTA trading companies. One of the lessons that we learned that Africa or the African business, they need, or especially the small and medium enterprises, to benefit from a continental agreement, they need aggregation. So a smaller coffee producer in Rwanda, or a tea producer in Kenya, or cocoa producer here, or cargo producer there, they need to work with a big aggregator to aggregate their product. So when the product is being transported in Africa with the high cost of transport that we suffer from in Africa, the economies of scale can justify the trade under the AFCFTA. So we created, or we proposed to our heads of state and government, or what we call the assembly, to allow or to recognize a structure we call the AFCFTA trading companies, where these trading companies, they are not part of the secretariat, but we are giving them the right to use the word AFCFTA to make sure that there is a momentum there. So what we started with, we created a trading company, usually in the GTI countries. There is one that has been notified to us by Ghana, the Gambia, South Africa, Chad, Rwanda, Kenya, Djibouti, and Egypt. And some countries even, and Cameroon, some countries even nominated more than one. In Cameroon cases, they nominated 9. So what that created, they created that network of aggregators where they can speak to each other. And when they speak to each other, the dynamic of that will result that they will leverage their market needs to export. What that I mean? Let's say I'm a trading company from Egypt and I'm speaking to another trading company from Ghana. I will say, in my market, in my factories, in my supermarket, I need cocoa powder, or I need chocolate, or I need whatever. But I also have pasta. I also have, I don't know what oil. If there is a need in your market for that, we can trade with each other. Okay? So that will make sure that when they leverage their market import and export, that the agreement is working for everyone. It is not only working for few countries. So that is the last of the section of the GTI. I want to touch very, very quickly on the rules of origin, because that is also another very interesting area that has taken a lot of time for our negotiation. But long story short, without going to much detail, there is two schools in the rules of origin. When you set a rule of origin of agreement, either you say, if you meet 40% or 50% of the product or of the value of the product, you qualify. Or there is another approach that say we will go to each product line by line and decide which rules that fit. Because the rule that fit the automotive or the car cannot not necessarily fit the bottle of milk. So the option that the AFCFTA negotiator opted for is to go line by line, which understandably have taken a lot of time, but I'm glad that this is the first meeting that I'm announcing that the Council of Ministers just concluded and agreed on the remaining headings and agreed on the remaining rules, especially for automotive and textile. Moving from there, I want to touch on some of the digital tools that we created. Moving from annexes and rules and tariff concession, I want to speak also about digital tools that we created, because to implement an agreement with the size of the AFCFTA between 55 countries, you can communicate with letters and memos, and you can communicate with the business sector in 55 countries that speak so many different languages, unless you develop a digital tool. So the first digital tool that I want to touch on is what we call the e-tariff book. In the e-tariff book, if you remember the structure that they say, if you are LDC, you will get this treatment, and there is sensitive and there is exclusion. You don't need to worry about that. You don't need to have a PhD in the AFCFTA. All you need to do is to go to the AFCFTA, au.afcfta.org, and you will go there and see so many interesting things. The first thing is the e-tariff book, and the AFCFTA Hub, and the AFCFTA non-tariff barrier portal, and the Pan-African Payment Settlement System, the AFCFTA Adjustment Fund, and the Automotive Fund. So few tools you can see in the first one, the e-tariff book. You will go there and you will search by product. You write the first few words of your product, and will show you different description. You need to select the specific description of your product. You need to select your destination, the countries that you are exporting, and the countries that you are exporting from. In the system internally, will do the calculation and will tell you this is the expected treatment that you will get. So that is the first straightforward tool. If you are a trader and you want to export to see if I send this product to South Africa, what treatment I will get. If you send it to Algeria, what I will get. This tool will help you. We have another thing for rules of origin. You remember when I said the negotiators decided to go line by line and decide which rules they will apply. So if you go to what we call the rules of origin manual, and I'm not sure if you can see the wording, but long story short, you will be able to, once you identify HS code from the e-tariff book, you will be able to go to the manual and select the rule that is applicable for you and how to calculate it. For the sake of time, I will be moving faster, but one very important also tool that we created, something we call the AFCFTA NTB online reporting mechanism. We all know that one of the main problems that we have in Africa trade is the NTBs and what the economic operators, what the traders face on the border. And for that, we created the tradebarriers.africa, where you can go there and register the problems that you are facing while you are trading and the country that you are exporting, any country of origin or the exporter. And once that is done, there is automatic notification to the authorities in these countries, the authorities of these countries, and the AFCFTA Secretariat, and we will try to address it. Once that is addressed, your product is being cleared. If it is not addressed and there is a different points of view between the two governments, I think there is a process that will kick in that can reach up till, if you remember, the protocol that I spoke about in the structure of the AFCFTA, the dispute settlement mechanism. So this is statistics of the non-tariff barrier problems that has been reported and their resolved percentage. We have 52% problems reported resolved. We have 6% of the NTBs that has been reported. It is already in the jurisdiction of the regional economic communities. For example, if you will go there and report about problem between Nigeria and Ghana, we're going to refer it to ECOWAS. We're not going to repeat what ECOWAS is doing. So 24% also has been transferred to other entities, and there is 18% that is still in process. So I will stop here. There is so many other tools. There is so many other elements of the AFCFTA, but to speak about all of them and give example for all of them would require much more than the time allocated for me. But for that, for here, I will pause here because this is the status of the trading goods. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Ali. If you don't mind, you could just sit here. I think the person who's controlling this must be Nigerian. Because when we saw the COEs and the number of COEs already from Nigeria, there were 10. And I saw Egypt and South Africa in thousands. So I was asking what exactly is happening. And while I was thinking about it, I think the operator also, thought about it as well and turned it off. But very interesting presentation. I know for some of us, we might have been lost because we're talking about goods, movement of goods, and some people here are just in the service industry. So I'm sure when we start the session, you'll probably give us some insight into what to expect if you're a service business here. But to help us unpack the presentation of Director Ali, I have the esteemed panel. Okay, I think first of all, my pleasure to introduce Grace Akozwa Zebu. I hope I didn't murder the name. She's the head of marketing, Ghana National Chamber of Commerce. Then I also have Dr. Nana Kosia Amoko. He is the business-to-business sales director of Casa Preco. Then I have Greg Rameho. This is Deloitte's Africa Global and Public Services Leader and Assurance Leader. And then finally, last and not the least, Olebaheng Ramatodi is Deloitte's Africa Indirect Tax Leader. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I'm not going to ask, what your thoughts are about the presentation, but I guess as we move along, maybe we'll be able to unpack it a little bit. But Dr. Director Ali, I think first thing before we move on, a lot of service businesses here. Okay, you are talking about HS codes, goods, sensitive list, tariff concessions, and everything that's pretty much around. So only if you are into merchandise trade that you probably understand. Okay. The question now is, what is in it for? What is the AFCFTA about for a service business? So if all I do is, we had MTN here. Okay. Some of these things here might be Greek, unless they're probably getting some of the equipment. But how do you explain what the AFCFTA is about for a business in the service industry?
Sure. First of all, I need to put caveat at the beginning that I'm not a trading service.
Oh.
For trading service, we have another director that we have in the Secretariat. However, in the presentation, I mentioned that in phase one, we started by generating both the trading goods protocol and the trading service protocol. And similar to the trading goods protocol, where we say that we have a schedule for tariff concession, we have another arrangement for trading service that we call schedule of specific commitment, where countries they can commit to liberalize specific sector. We started with 5 priority sectors. If on the top of my head, I think it is related to transport, tourism, communication, one of them, plus other two sectors. What that mean for, or what does the AFCFTA mean for a service provider? First thing first, the more you generate avenues for goods to move, the more demand for service. That is number one. If you are working in a service that is related to moving merchandise, but for the maybe the direct service sector like communication, the agreement will allow a company like MTN, for example, to operate or to enter other African markets. Once the country commit themselves to open these sectors, open these markets. Let's say, for example, if the country X that in their schedule of specific commitment, they open a sector in communication, sector in air transport, sector in transport. That would mean it is your right as an African citizen or the African business to go there and open business. Obviously, that does not bypass all the laws and all the requirements, but again, in many cases, establishing business, a service business in a country requires so many, paperwork, approvals, but what the trading service allowed, first of all, to give you the right to start a business and operate, and throughout the service sector, there is different layers. It's the right to operate, the right to reside in the country, the right to move business persons that is related to your business. So trading service has a fully fledged protocol that allow business and service providers to benefit from the AFC.
So essentially, as a service business, it becomes easier for you to operate in another African market when we start implementing that protocol compared to now. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, sure. The protocol is entered into force. It is implementable. But again, the reason I started by saying I'm not a director for trading service, because similar to the protocol on trading goods where, if I can say the devil in detail, you need to know what is there. You need also to have a dedicated discussion with service colleagues to tell you in which country, what sector open, and to what extent the layers of the sector has opened. But generally, as I said, the priority sectors for us were transport, were communication, were tourism.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's come back to trading goods. I know in your presentation, you talked about first shipment between Ghana and Kenya, and that was Casapreco. Yeah? So Casapreco is very, very popular within the AFCFTA conversation. Dr. Nana?
Yeah.
You are here, so you represent a very popular company. So anyone who was excited about AFCFTA heard about your organization. So what was it like? That first shipment, and I didn't know, Director Ali talked about that there was a problem between Ghana and Kenya, so maybe you'd be able to help. But I think my question here is, it's been 5 years now since you made that first shipment. How has it been for the last 5 years? What has been the experience like? Are you now trading more? Are you now shipping more? How does it affect your bottom line as a business?
Right, thanks. So between Casapreco and our partners in Kenya, it's been quite smooth. Hitches from the onset, which is normal in terms of any business endeavor. But as we begin to understand how things are supposed to be done, especially tapping into the after protocols, we are able to smoothen and be able to make shipments into Kenya. So in terms of volume, yes, we've managed to move volumes. Every month, I can attest that we move some finished products, typically our Alumu flagship brand. And just recently, we've added some other brands too as well that are also making inroads in Kenya. And we are also tapping into ensuring that we expand not in Nairobi alone, but into other major cities and towns so that we can have a bigger feel of the market. Yeah. So it's pretty much looking good in terms of our international business. Yes.
Okay, all right, excellent. Can you hear me now? Yes. So maybe I come to Grace now. There are certain places that we go to and they've still not heard about the AFCFTA. You are closest to policymakers, you are closest to the businesses, you are closest to everybody who has an interaction with the AFCFTA. I think my question is, what are you hearing on the ground? Is it you have not heard about it, we don't know what it is? And how optimistic are you that the AFCFTA will be successful? And then ultimately, if you interact with the AFCFTA Secretariat, what's your general impression of how things are being implemented?
Very much. Can I call you?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So, for the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, since the launch of trading under the AFCFTA, we have been involved in nationwide sensitization and capacity building programs to ensure that the private sector is fully educated or informed about the agreement and what the private sector stands for. As far as awareness creation is concerned, we can say that initially. So, like I said, since the launch of trading, GNCCI, I always say, has taken the AFCFTA project as a World Cup. We have gone around the whole country, every district, with support from some development partners. I can mention GIZ, and we've done series of sensitization programs educating the business community on the AFCFTA and its benefits. I must say that initially, as was stated, there was some misconception about, yes, the whole Africa has one market, and therefore you take your goods or you carry yourself to the next available market and start selling. But when what we realized was that people needed to know more about the rules of origin when it comes to trading goods. And even it's not a matter of you being in Ghana or within a state party that qualifies what you're doing to trade in an AFCFTA ratified another state party. What the requirement in terms of raw material, percentage of raw material and value addition was something that we really hit so that people will understand. And we realized that once we went around, people were a bit disappointed because initially they thought that this is just going to be an open market from start, and anything I'm involved in can just go across the other state parties' border and start trading. So we've not... we've been trying to work on getting that sensitization. Of course, I remember, I think 2 years ago, I was at a workshop by CATS International, and their baseline study still indicated that a lot of people were still not informed appropriately about the AFCFTA. So we did another round, and at the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce, we also formalized women and youth section, because we realized that when it comes to information dissemination, women take time to grasp. women take time to understand the process, especially within our SME sector, where most of them may not necessarily have formal education. You need to do more than just telling them about EFCFTA, or you need to do more about making sure that you are deliberate about meeting only women where you can go at their pace. And so we've been doing that. Yes, we will still have some level of, if you like, a gap in understanding the AFCFTA, but we are still, it's a work in progress. We are still on it. We are working hard at it. We are in constant collaboration with government agencies like the National AFCFTA Coordinating Office. We know that the AFTA Secretariat deals with state parties and not individual institutions. So we work with them through the Ministry of Trade and other relevant state institutions, as I mentioned, the National Coordination Office. So there's a lot of enthusiasm about the AFCFTA. I think the time has come for the AFTA Secretariat to crown me as an ambassador. Because
Yes, I agree.
no matter the challenges we face, we still believe that it's a teething process. EU didn't just become EU today. And so if we all believe that this African market is workable, then we face the challenges as they come together. And then we cross one hurdle and then we move to the next. But definitely, there's enthusiasm. Anybody who is doing business, the first thing that must come to your mind is the market. Who are you serving? And so for you to, for instance, if you are in Ghana and you are limited to just our little economy, the possibility of you gaining is, cannot be, is less. But if there's the opportunity of reaching the whole African market, it's a bigger market. Who wouldn't be happy about it? There are challenges, and I'm not sure we are talking about the challenges now. So I just want to focus on the fact that, yes, we are still a work in progress. We are still educating the business community, the private sector. We are deliberate about making sure that no one is left out. And we are also encouraging ourselves that whatever the challenges, if we are resolute, if we work together, if we believe that AFCFTA has come to stay, then we can work at it. Pardon me for those who are Christians. There's a verse in the Bible which excites me. When the Tower of Babel was being built, I think in Genesis, and there was a phrase that the people is one. There is nothing they said to do that they cannot do. God put all the people together and described them as one people with a singular pronoun. So if we are one and we believe in this together, yes, there's hope for the continent.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Very good. Very, very, very good contribution. I think, again, that fits into the earlier conversation we had in the morning session about pulling together and ensuring that, no, we can disseminate this. Director, she just offered herself to be an ambassador for, and I'll mention to the SG when he comes.
That is not to say that we don't have challenges.
Yes.
Yes. So.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think obviously that is our honor. What I want to say is, without taking more time, the AFCFTA is different from the AFCFTA Secretariat.
Yeah.
The AFCFTA is everyone.
Yeah.
The AFCFTA is everyone. So I'm proud of everything she said, and the passion she was speaking about. She's more than ambassador. She is the AFCFTA. She's the true, maybe, image to what is the AFCFTA.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. So let's shift gears quickly to infrastructure. Director, I know some of the things you probably hear from businesses is how can we move things? How can we move things through? If there are no roads, talk about ocean freight, airplanes. Again, we talk about BASA and SATM and all the agreements. But I think infrastructure is very critical. And Greg, I know this is where this is something you talk about every time as our GPS leader around infrastructure in Africa. You know, you hear things like the Africa has an estimated, infrastructure deficit about 108 million US dollars. Okay, so I think the question for me here is, what more do we need to do? What should governments do? Governments enable businesses trade. What is your view around how we should close this gap? Can we close this gap? If we don't close this gap, if we don't close this deficit in infrastructure, do you think all the brilliant things that Director Ali has talked about, can we actually see trade go? And that's why I talked about services, Director, because I mean, services don't have this infrastructure problem. But again, we need to have goods moving. So, Greg, I mean, your thoughts around what he said and then the role of infrastructure and government.
No, thank you. No, I think it is a well-known fact, whether through research or just through observation, that infrastructure is key for economic growth. And, we are now going into the G20 summit in South Africa in November, late November. And I was privileged to be part of the Business 20, where with many other entities in the room and across the continent and the globe, and I was part of the infrastructure, finance and infrastructure task force, where I led as the knowledge partner. One of the key things that we discussed is around this infrastructure gap in the African continent, where it is believed that there's about 108 billion, finance gap for infrastructure development. And this is key. And I think when you hear Director Mohammed talking about some of the challenges and some of the things that they have to overcome over the years, one key thing is around infrastructure, is around mobility and so on. So in this discussions that we've been having as B20, we said it is important for the African continent, for example, to be a little bit more transparent around what is the infrastructure need. And many of the task force members that were coming from the likes of JP Morgan, the likes of Standard Bank Chartered, which is here, the Africa Finance Corporation and so on, they were saying, finance is a problem, but it's not the critical problem. The critical problem is to understand where is investable infrastructure projects. Because many projects are identified, but they don't see the light of day. And so visibility, transparency around infrastructure projects is key. And I like some of the private and public partnership initiatives around this, including philanthropic organizations that are coming on board to say, as much as infrastructure goods are provided by the government, we have a physical challenge across the continent. And so we need private sector investment to come on board. And that's what, for example, when the FCTA had its own intra-Africa trade fair, it was also to encourage private participation to bring funds into the coffers to make sure that there's this infrastructure development across the continent. So it is very key in terms of what we would like to see from an intra-Africa trade perspective. Infrastructure is very key to that. And we have issues around uneven infrastructure investment across the continent. And some of these engagements, discussions is about how do we also close some of these gaps, because we cannot talk about a trading, intra-trade, when you don't have the same level of infrastructure across the board. And this includes digital infrastructure, which is key.
Before I come to Ola, Director, how much of this infrastructure conversation, when you talk among your directors on the ESG, how much of this affects how optimistic you are about the growth of the AFCFTA? Is it a key issue?
Well, the thing I would say, it is not about being optimistic or not. It is about if there is a challenge, the question is what we can do about it. And when you try to answer this question, you also need to understand what is your role as a AFCFTA secretariat or your role as a AFCFTA, because the AFCFTA is trade policy tool. You need to understand that. The AFCFTA is not the answer for everything. Okay. However, infrastructure is the main problem for Africa, a main obstacle for the intra-Africa trade, which is the main goal for the AFCFTA. So there is cross-cutting. So what would mean for a trade policy tool to address infrastructure? Trade policy tool to address the infrastructure need to create maybe creative tools, a creative idea, creative policies to address that. I will give you an example. So one of the things that we are facing from structure and connectivity or for the moving of goods, the long time of clearance. If you reduce the time of clearance on the border, you will have less problem for transport, which indirectly or directly resolve the issue of the problem of infrastructure. So when we created an initiative for the digitization of the border, or digitization of the custom process. Once you do that, and once that is connected, that will help reduce the infrastructure problem. There is another initiative related maybe to corridor approach. We started to work on corridor approach, and I think my colleague, director of customs, she is going to speak about that in a different panel. But this is the approach that we selected. But the idea is, investment, you should not wait someone to come and put trillions of dollars in Africa to solve the infrastructure problem, because even at that amount of money, it will not be resolved. Investment in infrastructure will come when there is opportunities. You create opportunity, you create market. So why there is no, for example, why there is no shipping line directly going between Ghana and South Africa, or from Egypt to South Africa, or around Africa? Why we don't have this question? Why we don't have this round Belt and Road like initiative around Africa? Because businesses, they don't see demand for the shipping.
Right.
So when you create a trade policy tool that create a market,
Right.
that will be invitation for businesses. Please come and invest. There is opportunity here. You know how many shipments he's taking from Ghana to Kenya? The number has increased, and he's one, there is two or three or four, many of them. The more demand, so it is about time for a business to say, you know what, I'm going to invest in, because there is something to me in there.
Right.
So trade policy tool, when they address infrastructure, obviously that would mean we continue work with the AFDB, continue work with our partners, come and invest here, corridor this, corridor that. But the essence of the trade policy, you create the market, they create the demand for the infrastructure to happen.
Excellent. So you create the demand. Once there's demand, then somebody, like Greg said, there enough private sector involvement and come and put $100 billion infrastructure. All right. I mean, it makes sense. Now let's quickly go to geopolitics. I know you touched on it earlier on, but I'd like to bring in Oleb here, and then we'll ask questions very quickly. The U.S. admin did a reset of the global trade arrangement. Stopped. And then we have all this uncertainty around. Okay, the AFCFTA. A lot of analysts have talked about the AFCFTA being African solutions to the global problems. Okay, I know you interact with lots of businesses on a daily basis. What are you hearing from your clients around, first of all, how the global reset is impacting their business, and potentially how the AFCFTA could be that solution to all the uncertainty?
Right, thanks, CJ. And good afternoon to everybody. So, I mean, I remember having a conversation around AGOA about 10, 15 years ago. There had always been an expectation that at some stage, some countries which are considered developed, such as South Africa, would discontinue benefiting under the AGOA, right? But none of the experts, myself and probably yourself included, projected or anticipated a future where AGOA would expire without being updated for continued benefit. Secondly, that you'd be sitting with tariffs that range from 10% to about 50%. And that thirdly, that you'll be sitting in a situation where a rule-based World Trade Organization dispensation that's ruled the world for about 80 years would be at risk of being discontinued. So you're asking a question around my client and the type of conversation that we're having. It was not until about 3 months ago that I started getting clients that export goods into the US, because generally in my line of work, I would service clients that go into the Europe and go to China and then the other African countries. And the one thing that I'm getting out of these clients is there are some that are hoping that this is a temporary thing that is going to pass, that is a storm that's passing. But there are others who look at it as a climate change type of conversation where, painful as it is, you have to accept that things have changed, things are pivoting, and that you need to start looking for business partners elsewhere in the world. So I find that depending on which direction a client looks at this, there would then be an interest around where else can we look. And the AFCFTA, given what it is, becomes that opportunity for trade to engage with. Obviously, there are challenges that we will talk to at a later stage, but it definitely is a platform that business should be leveraging to try and, vary the client base, so to speak, for long-term sustainability.
Interesting.
Because I think that point is very critical. I think the opportunity that has been presented by these geopolitical tensions in terms of the third market now, is that, the more you have the continent coming together and strengthening cooperation and integration amongst itself, the more bargaining power we have in terms of even from a third market perspective. And so the work of the FCTA is critical in that context. And what I understand Olep to be saying is that also it enhances economic diversification on the continent. And that's what I think we should be looking at in terms of the geopolitical tensions that are creating benefits for the Africa continent in itself.
Excellent point. So do we have any questions for my panelists? Any questions? Yes, you do. Okay, but so I'll come to that. But I just wanted to get in Dr. Nana in quickly. How much of, I know you started early before all the uncertainty came early this year. How much of this has impacted what you're doing? Are you having to recalibrate your supply chains now as a business? I mean, if you just want to add to what Olep has raised.
Hello? Yeah. So with the opportunity that we see, particularly with these geopolitical tensions that are coming up, we are positioning ourselves to take advantage in terms of tapping into AFTA. So we have developed models where we are extending into other markets where previously we're not playing. As we speak, we have entered into Tanzania through Kenya to see how we can play. We have moved into South Africa as well. Nigeria, we are already there. I think the presence of Casapreco in Nigeria has been quite enormous, opening up the bitters market. So yes, this is an opportunity for us. Although looking at challenges that are embedded, within the African trade, we still feel that this is the opportunity for us to move into areas that we're not in initially to see how we can tap and then make ourselves stronger in those markets. So it's something that we have already started investing in logistics in terms of trucks where if it is possible to do it within the West African region, also strengthening our supply chain in such a manner that do we need to produce in Nigeria to serve other markets, or we produce in Ghana to move? Setting up in Liberia, setting up in Sierra Leone, all in a bit of tapping into the tensions that are around and the opportunities that we can also gather in Africa.
Excellent. I just want to take questions for time. So maybe we could have 2 questions. I can see hand up there. Any other question on this side? Any question on this side? Okay. So 1 and then second one there. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Chineye Atonda. I'm a commodity trader. I'm in the energy space. So I wanted to, my first question, right, is to Director Mohammed. And thankfully, he already said AFCFTA is a trade policy tool, not necessarily the answer to everything. But I just wanted to find out, in the policy to enhance trade, how much is the financial institution being carried along? Because one of the key facilitators of trade at the end of the day is money. And we know in Africa we don't have any uniform currency. Neither are our currencies tradable on large exchanges. So even if we want to enhance trade, right, it's going to always be a silent elephant in the room because we also have currencies that fluctuate widely. So there's almost like there will always be that trust issue. So that's one of the things I wanted to find out, like how are the financial institutions carried along and how are they also trying to enhance this goal that we're trying to chase? Then the second thing I wanted to mention is that trade is also heavily enhanced through credit, right? And without trust, people don't give credit. And in Africa, to the best of my knowledge, because I'm always looking for, I don't know, credit insurance companies that guarantee insurance between African countries. In fact, it's even so bad that, okay, yes, I'm in energy, and even when I have a transaction from NMPC, which you would think is a national state company, even some years ago, you will hear the insurance companies that are not based in Africa say, oh, I can't take NMPC risks. So if you can't take a sovereignty, NMPC is not a sovereignty, but as at that time, you know what it was. How do you now want them to trust other SMEs or upcoming companies to say, okay, I will insure your credit? Thank you.
Thank you. The second question?
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Gilbert Ado. I think that you did indicate that the creation of demand rise parallel with infrastructure. So the question I asked myself was, before AFCFTA, there were regional blocks that existed. They had their nuances, but what was the infrastructure efficiency within those blocks, which AFCFTA could leverage on? Because for it to be successful, we need to look at the pros and cons on existing infrastructure within the blocks. If we take the South African or the Southern African side, were there infrastructure that they were leveraging on to even trade among themselves? If there existed such a system, how could we replicate such a model in the other African countries whilst we seek to synchronize? Because when we pick West Africa, we have inland countries that rely on the coastal lines to do trade in terms of buying things from other countries and then exporting into their country. If I take Ghana and Burkina Faso, you need to then get a haulage car to carry the thing to Burkina Faso? Could we do rail? How efficient could that be? How can we replicate that in other African countries? Kasapreko is saying, I'm looking at setting up in Liberia to transport your products. How efficient would that be if you are not going haulage, but we are doing rail? So I feel that, yes, in as much as we are saying that the trade could create, or the demand could create the infrastructure, how have we leveraged on existing infrastructure to see how efficient this can be deployed in terms of trade? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we have about 5 minutes more, so maybe Director Ali, you respond to Chineye's question and Gilbert's question, and then the rest of the panelists, 1 minute, just final thoughts on this subject.
Yeah. So when I said the AFCFT is not a response to everything, I meant the legal framework of the AFCFT is not designed to address everything. However, any problem that is related to trade, we are trying to do something about it. Because we are working in Africa with already existing institutions, and we already have already existing capacities. So specifically for finance, we're working very, very closely with the Afri-Exim Bank and the commercial banks. And we created something called the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. Yes, we don't have single currency, but you can trade under BAPS with your local currency. What that means, you can buy a product or import product coming from Kenya to Ghana, and you pay the price in Ghana cedi, and the other way around in the Kenyan shilling. What that would mean that you will save the exchange, the cost of exchanging to third currency and paying the fees of transport. And even I heard that the bank, or we're working with the bank, even the bank is working on issuing Pan-African Payment Settlement System card. So you can take the card and go everywhere. You don't have single currency. But again, this is what I meant, the AFCFT is not designed, because the AFCFT has an agreement with the Secretariat will never have the same complexity to address something about the different currencies and BEPS. That's why we're working with Afri-Exim Bank. Speaking about the cost of financing and guarantees, that is actually has been a noticeable challenge that we faced during the guided trade initiative. We faced with AFCFT trading companies. We faced with everywhere. And again, you need to understand what is the root of the problem. If you are importing product from African country, and this is agricultural product, the cost or the challenges around the transport itself impose maybe a risk that increase the guarantee cost. The cost of finance also in Africa is so high. So what I would say also is indirectly you're resolving or you're clearing the pipeline will try to reduce that, including more financial institutions. But as I said again, we are trying to explore different funding options and sources, whether it is from Africa or from outside Africa, and we are trying to maybe pre-negotiate on behalf of African business to negotiate maybe a package with a certain interest rate or a package with certain condition that is easy, that is there. For the regional economic communities, very, very quickly, the agreement recognizes the regional economic communities as our building blocks. You may notice that the NTBs, we refer to them, the matters that is related to them, the trade among, if there is a regional economic community like ECOWAS, for example, reached 100%, they maintain this 100%. We are not asking them to roll back to match the 90% of the AFCFTA until we reach 100% under the AFCFTA. So regional economic community, again, their engagement, their level of closeness, their level of cooperation on a regional level is unmatched, because I can't be operating here from Accra and pretend that I know better than a secretariat that is operating in Southern Africa or in East African community. So we are working closely with them. We have a coordination mechanism with them. What is the AFCFT is bringing new? Because if you notice, all the regional economic communities, they are concentrated in a geographical location in Africa. And usually, this geographical location in Africa usually produce the same. You go to East Africa, all of them, they are producing coffee and tea. West Africa, the majority are producing cocoa, cashew, and so the comparative advantage of what you are producing can be leveraged when you introduce a single market like the AFCFTA. I'm not saying the regional economic communities, they don't have opportunities to work among themselves, but I'm saying it is even further leverages when you connect all of them together under the AFCFTA.
Thank you so much. We have we're almost out of time. Actually out of time. So maybe if 1 minute each, just your final thoughts on the subject.
So I would just add to what has been said in terms of we taking advantage of the market. We also want to appeal to the state parties that have ratified the agreement to actually trade. We know a lot of them who have ratified and they are still not trading. If we want private sector to invest in the logistics sector, then we should create the opportunity. And the opportunity will come when the markets are open. Businesses will go when the markets are open, and then private sector can get involved in creating the logistical needs that can help us trade amongst ourselves. In the morning, I heard about 14 countries are represented in this conference. Let all of us be advocates in our various countries that our governments must walk the talk of the ratification of the AFCFTA agreement. That is my appeal to all of us here. And then I also want to also say that, of course, Africa trading amongst ourselves is not a competition. We complement each other. As has been said, if you go to each region, there are certain, they have core competence, or they have certain things that are peculiar to them. They do it better. Let us not take what Kenya has from Ghana and go and struggle with Kenya, but rather find what Kenya doesn't have, or what can we do with Kenya such that we complement each other. If we see AFCFTA as a complementary agreement to help us trade amongst ourselves and not to compete amongst ourselves, then all of us will open up and be ready to trade, because the fiscal challenges come to play when I'm reducing my tariffs, which form a major part of revenue for these state parties. It can also create a problem. If you are pushing me out of the market, then I will not open. And I also want to plead with the Secretariat. They should have some, I don't know, the power they have to whip the countries that have ratified and submitted their schedules to start trading in good faith, not right. on paper.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Nana?
Okay. So for us as a business, we understand perfectly the tariffs that have been waived, looking at all the categories. But the gray area is the NTBs. And today, this partner says, I need this. The next day, you present that one, and it is another document. So we are looking forward for us to be having some standardization where if I present that one, it cut across, the market. Right. And then instead of doing things manually, can we go into the digitalization where it's just a press of a button and things just happen? If we do that, then we surmount all these supply chain delays, which comes as a cost to us as a business. Then we can progressively, drive the after agenda. So as a business, this is what we are looking for, and we expect that leaving this discussion, it is something that the director is going to take and then drive for us.
Thank you so much. Greg?
Yeah, so I think the issue is complex. In fact, you could have seen even when the director was presenting earlier that it's quite complex. And I think having 8 regional, economic communities in itself is also complex, it's confusing and so on. But of course, government does not trade. They make these policies, but without, enough private participation, some of the policies might not be fit for purpose.
Right.
So I would say that private sector has to be more involved to guide, to provide expertise, etc., to make sure that these policies are fit for purpose. I mean, some of the questions that came from the audience, they are complex.
Yeah.
But without the private sector involvement, they won't be overcome. And I think we need this one market that the FCTA is trying to create.
Excellent,
Thank
excellent. Olep, final thoughts? Yeah.
Okay, sounds like I'm good. So 2 points, right? One is trade with the rest of the world. Tayo earlier said the US is too big for us to ignore. I do think that we need to leverage of the AFCFTA to try and encourage our, improve our bargaining power in our engagement with the rest of the world from a trade negotiation perspective. The fact that we are at the moment individually negotiating with the US as individual states doesn't serve us. Secondly, the intra-Africa trade. You look at the stats, the non-tariff barriers reporting into the Secretariat, the numbers are not encouraging. We've got, over a 5-year period, complaints less than 50, which means, in my view, and this is taking from a workshop that I attended last week in Cape Town, where people were saying, we are not aware of a lot of initiatives that are driven by the AFCFTA, especially as small businesses. There is a lot of work that needs to be done at that level to make sure that we create awareness around the benefits that comes with the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this panel deserves a round of applause. So it's my absolute pleasure to have moderated this session, and I think we'll be well over time now. So maybe we just close this here.